Welcome to Mythic Tales of Hope by the Elven Scholar. Please feel free to grab a spot by the fire while we recall tales from the elves and fee, stories of hope and adventure, shrouded in the mists of legends.
Welcome all my elven, fae, and other kin brothers and sisters to our first episode of Mythic Tales of Hope by the Elven Scholar. My name is Dr. Erin Dispendalelis, and I am the Elven Scholar, and we're going to take some time today and just enjoy some tales and legends from the past. And hopefully they'll each have a message for you. We're going to go and talk about different legends and myths, and along with some poetry that pertains to some of these stories. We're going to talk about things like Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth and Zen philosophy, Elven spirituality. So our tales are meant to enjoy, but also to give you possibly some hope, a message to carry with you each day. It's very interesting about St. Patrick. I told about this in my radio show. When St. Patrick first came to Ireland and he brought the other monks with them, the monks were rather zealous and they tried to destroy the native stories and legends of the villages that were there in Ireland. And when St. Patrick heard about this, he stopped them and he said, please do not destroy their history. He said, there will come a day, someday, when they will need these stories again. And I honestly believe that we're there now. We need these stories and their messages more than ever before as people lose contact and connection with nature, with the world, with their communities, and with their own true nature, with their inner selves. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to try to do it every Sunday, and we'll see how this goes. So for today, we're going to touch on some elvish poetry that I have written and also presented to us by Eruanna, who is Tarja Pabo out of Estonia. She's a wonderful elven poet, and we're going to be retelling some of her poetry. Okay, so first off, I would like to talk about a wonderful little story. It's not that ancient at all, but the message in it is beautiful, and we certainly need this message today, as I mentioned in the previous radio show about impossible dreams. And I'm going to relate to you a little story of Don Quixote. And for some of you, I imagine most of you know who Don Quixote was, but it was a wonderful book written quite some time ago about an individual who loved to read books. And he fell so in love with the tales of knights and chivalry, and he just wanted to believe that chivalry wasn't dead yet. And he also believed that anything is possible. So this story is about believing in something hard enough that you can make it true for yourself. Some will interpret this as, he obviously was misguided and lived far too much into a fantasy realm, and he didn't see the world clearly. But maybe sometimes it's those people that see it more clearly than we do. So I hope you enjoy the story.
The story of Don Quixote de la Mancha. Alonso Quijano was a middle-aged gentleman from the region of La Mancha in central Spain. Instead of taking care of his estate, Alonso was obsessed with the chivalrous ideals touted in the books he constantly read. He would imagine himself as a knight, riding his noble steed, defending the helpless, and destroying the wicked. One day he went to his neighbor, a simple man called Sancho Panza, and told him, "Sancho, I have decided that I will become a brave knight, and I would like you to become my faithful squire." Sancho didn't quite understand what was going on, but he agreed to go along with his neighbor. Alonso went back home and put on his grandfather's dusty and rusty armor. Then he chose an old horse to ride upon and gave a donkey to Sancho. "Beware, world! I am Don Quixote, a brave and noble knight, and this is my horse Rocinante. Off we go, Sancho," he said, and they both went riding to a nearby village called El Toboso. As Don Quixote and Sancho Panza proudly rode through the streets of El Toboso, the villagers looked curiously at the two strange characters and wondered who they could be and what they could be doing. Quite unexpectedly, Don Quixote and Sancho rode past a young peasant woman who was working in the fields. She was a rather brawny girl, well built and sturdy, but through Don Quixote's imaginative eyes, she looked like the most beautiful and delicate maiden he had ever seen, and he even imagined a name for her.
Her name is Dulcinea. Her rank must be at least that of a princess, since she is my queen and lady, and her beauty superhuman, since all the impossible and fanciful attributes of beauty which the poets apply to their ladies are verified in her. For her hairs are gold, her forehead Elysian fields, her eyebrows rainbows, her eyes suns, her cheeks roses, her lips coral, her teeth pearls, her neck alabaster, her bosom marble, her hands ivory, her fairness snow. And what modesty conceals from sight such, I think and imagine as rational reflection can only extol, not compare, he told Sancho. Sancho was confused. See, Sancho, Don Quixote tells him, this is our purpose, to protect such a lovely maiden from the dangers of the world.
Don't worry, Dulcinea. Don Quixote is here to fight the bad and wicked,
he shouted back as they continued their journey. Don Quixote and Sancho were resting under a tree when suddenly they see a big cloud of dust approaching and hear a loud noise.
Look, Sancho,
shouts Don Quixote.
An enemy army approaches. Give me my lance and shield.
Don Quixote jumps onto Rocinante and quickly charges, but it was just a big flock of sheep, so Don Quixote sees himself alone in the middle of hundreds of running sheep. Of course, that Don Quixote, he could see enemy soldiers amidst the sheep that were running past him.
Stay here and fight, you cowards,
he shouted loudly as he tried to manage his lance. Sancho would look at this, not knowing what to think. There were so many sheep running that eventually Don Quixote lost his balance and fell from his horse. Sancho ran to help him up.
They were too many, Sancho, but I have fought well, haven't I? Don Quixote asked.
Yes, you did, Sancho replied to him. Don Quixote and Sancho continue their journey through the night. A big storm approaches, and quickly rain, wind, and lightning turn Don Quixote's journey even more difficult. The wind blew so strong that they even have difficulty moving forward. Don Quixote comes around a hill where some windmills are spinning fast due to the wind speed. Illuminated by the lightning, the windmills look mysterious, and for Don Quixote's imagination, those were not windmills.
Look, Sancho, he said. Giants, giants everywhere.
Of course, Sancho could not see any giant, only windmills. Suddenly, Don Quixote could see Dulcinea being held captive on one of the giant's hands.
Dulcinea! Dulcinea!
He shouted.
I'll come and save you.
And he charged toward the windmill that, for him, was a giant who had captured his love, Dulcinea.
Fear not, Dulcinea. I am coming. Prepare to feel my lance, evil creature,
he said as he prepared to strike. Of course, that poor Don Quixote speared the sail of the windmill and got stuck there, spinning around and around for hours until the wind calmed down and he eventually fell on the ground. Don Quixote had been defeated. He was beaten and depressed. Sancho took his master back home, while Don Quixote tried to figure out exactly what had happened. Returned to his estate, Don Quixote realized that all his adventures were simply a product of his imagination. Don Quixote never embarrassed himself further by going on any more quests, but his house would always be full of children to whom he would tell the most fantastic stories about knights, squires, and noble quests, and all lived happily together, going on many, many more adventures in their imagination. The end.
While in his case, he never went on another quest again or another adventure, but what he did do was go on with the rest of his life to inspire others, to inspire other children to reach out with their imaginations and maybe to become something more than they thought they could be. A great example of this is how fantasy can lead us to something more real. Obviously, the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have gone on to become scientists, astronauts, engineers, simply because of Star Trek. From the very early days in the 1960s with Star Trek up until today, there are still people being inspired, watching that going, I want to do that. I want to go into space. I want to choose a different life for ourselves. So fantasy can lead us and inspire us to become something more, to reach for that impossible dream, to reach for that unreachable star. All right, let's step back about 1,000, 2,000 years ago, way into the mists of ancient Ireland. And I'm going to play a wonderful little tale here. I learned about this when I was very young myself. And it's the tale of Oisin and the land of the eternal young. He was a great warrior, and he found his way through his bravery and his courage and his good looks, and he was taken away to the land of the fairies, the eternal young, and was with the queen. And they fell in love and were together for, obviously, he didn't know it, but was for a very long period of time. And there came a moment when he wanted to go back home just to let everyone know that he was okay. And she warned him that if you go back to Ireland, do not step foot, do not get off the horse. I will lend you a magical horse. If you step foot on the ground, you will never return again. So this is a wonderful tale retold to you, and I'm going to play it here in a moment. But from me, if there's a message in this tale, it's sometimes be careful what you wish for, and pause and listen to wisdom once in a while. All right, so I hope you enjoy it. The tale of Oisin and the land of the eternal young.
In a typical hero's journey, the protagonist sets out on an adventure, undergoes great change, and returns in triumph to their point of origin. But in the Irish genre of myth known as Achtarí, the journey to the other world ends in a point of no return. While there are many different versions of the other world in Irish mythology, the most well-known example occurs in the story of Oisin. Oisin was the son of Finn MacCool, the leader of a group of pagan warriors known as the Fianna. As Oisin rode with his companions one day, he was visited by the immortal princess Niamh. The two fell instantly in love, and Niamh pulled Oisin onto her white horse and rode with him to the edge of the Irish Sea. As they made for the horizon, the riders sunk into a golden haze. They came to the shores of the gleaming kingdom called Tir na Nog. This was the home of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people who ruled ancient Ireland long before Oisin's time. From the point of his arrival, Oisin's every need was met. He married Niamh in a grand ceremony and was welcomed into her family. When he wished to hear music, his ears filled with bewitching tones. When he hungered, golden plates appeared laden with fragrant food. He admired scenes of great beauty, in colours that he had no name for. All around him, the land and the people existed in a state of unmoving perfection. But what Oisin didn't know was that Tir na Nog was the land of youth, in which time stood still and the people never aged. In his new home, Oisin continued to hunt and explore as he had in Ireland, but in the land of youth he possessed a strange new invincibility. At the end of each day of adventuring, Oisin's wounds magically healed themselves as he slept in Niamh's arms. Although glory and pleasure came easily to Oisin in the land of youth, he missed the Fianna and the adventures they had in Ireland. After 3 years in Tirnanog, he was struck by a deep yearning for home. Before he embarked on his journey back, Niamh warned him that he must not alight from his horse to touch the earth with his own feet. When Oisin reached the shores of Ireland, it felt as if a shadow had fallen over the world. On the hill where his father's palace lay, he saw only a ruin strewn with weeds. His calls for his friends and family echoed from derelict walls. Horrified, Oisin rode until he came upon a group of peasants working in the fields. They were struggling to remove a boulder from their land, and forgetting Niamh's warning, Oisin leapt from his horse and rolled it away with his superhuman strength. The crowd's cheers soon turned into shrieks. In place of the youth was an old man whose beard swept the ground and whose legs buckled under him. He cried out for Finn and the Fianna, but the people only recognised these names from the distant past of 300 years before. Time had betrayed Oisin, and his return to mortal lands had aged him irreversibly. Throughout Irish folklore, sightings of the land of youth have been reported in the depths of wells, on the brink of the horizon, or in the gloom of caves. But those who know the tale of Oisin tell of another vision, that of a shining princess, carried upon the distant waves by a white horse, still hoping for the return of her doomed love.
Okay, now let's flash forward about 1,000 years and let's go to ancient Japan. And here is a wonderful story called The Wise Old Man. It's an ancient Zen story about a young man in search of wisdom, which we were just talking about. And he tries to find it, but unfortunately in his journey he carries with him his own perspective and ego of what wisdom actually is. So it's a story of finding what you seek and not even recognizing that it was right before your face. So here we go. This is the story of the wise old man.
Once upon a time, word spread across the country about the wise holy man who lived in a house atop of the mountain. And so a young man from the village decided to undertake that difficult journey to visit him. When he arrived at the house, an old servant opened the door and greeted him. "I have traveled long, and now I would like to see the wise holy man," said the young man. The servant smiled and led him inside. As they walked through the house, the man from the village looked around eagerly in each room, anticipating his encounter with this legendary holy man. Before long, they had walked through the entire house, and the servant and the young man stood outside the door again. "But I wanted to see the holy man," said the young man to the servant. "You already have," said the old man. "Everyone you may meet in life, even if they appear commonplace, see each of them as a wise holy man. If you do this, then whatever problem you brought here today will be solved." You see, in life, in your life, the greatest challenges require us to overcome obstacles within, not without. In this story, the young man was able to conquer a long mountain path, but did not attempt to move beyond his own ego. The old servant himself was the wise old man. If you apply this lesson to your day-to-day problems, then maybe they will be solved today. This is Dare to Do Motivation Stories. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.
It's time to retell a story of my own. And in here, we're going along with the further adventures of the Elven Zen monk by the name of Travail. I started talking about him in my radio show, and I thought I'd go ahead and give you another adventure. And this one is about setting ourselves free and not letting the rest of the world hold us back or tell us something that's not true about our own inner nature. So we're going to go ahead and have a little adventure with the Elven Zen monk, Travail. Through most of Travail's life, he loved traveling from village to village, teaching where those would listen and moving on when they wouldn't. This was a period of time when there was quite a bit of warfare going on, and he knew that he was needed more than ever, the stories of encouragement and hope. So again, he would go from village to village, especially those that he would hear where there had been already war that had swept through and had left the people and the villages devastated. Well, on one of these journeys, he came across a village that was just about empty. There was no one left in there but one individual. And it was one of the prisoners had been left behind, and it was staked to the ground with a heavy iron chain. And he'd been left there to die, as everyone had either been killed off or had run off. So as Travail came forward, he saw him in the middle of the village, chained again with his heavy iron chain. And he asked him, "Why are you still here?" Because he could see that where the individual had been chained, probably about 5-6 feet away, was the key. And I guess to taunt them, they had thrown the key on the ground and left it there. And Travail asked, "Why did you not just grab the key?" And the prisoner in a weak voice said, "I've tried. I've stretched my arms as far as I could because I'm chained by one of my wrists and I can't go any further to reach it." And Travail, with the simple logic and wisdom of a Zen monk, said, "All you have to do is stretch out with your legs as far as you can go, and your feet will be able to grab the key, and there is no need for you to suffer here." And the prisoner looked over, and with a slightly astonished look on his face, instead of trying to reach for the key with his other hand, he stretched out as far as he could, and with his toes, he was able to grab the keys and pull them back in, and he was able to unlock himself. It's an example of how we limit our own selves and produce the prison within our own mind. Well, having succeeded here, Travail went on to the next village. And after about a day or so, he came to another village, and sure enough, there was yet a very similar situation, chained in the middle of the village, or I should say, imprisoned in the middle of the village, was yet another prisoner, only he was being held to a stake with a length of rope that had been tied mercilessly tight around one of his wrists. And again, in an attempt to taunt the prisoner, a knife had been thrown on the ground, just out of reach of his hands. And Travail came up to him again and said, "Why are you laying here, suffering for no need, when just within reach of your feet, if you would stretch out far enough, your toes could grab the knife and pull it back in?" And again, an astonished look came across the prisoner's face, and he reached as far as he could, and he grabbed the knife with his toes and pulled it in and cut himself free and ran off. Well, Travail, obviously there was no one else here to talk to, so he moved on, and it took a couple of more days, and eventually he came to the last village that had been attacked in this war. And again, one last time, there was a prisoner kept trapped in the middle of the village. Only this time, there was no stake. There was no rope. There was no chain. A circle had been drawn around him, keeping him confined within about a 4-foot little area. And Travail came up and he asked, "Why are you here? Why have you not left?" "Oh, I cannot leave, wise one. I was told that if I step outside of this circle, I will surely die the instant I do." And Travail tried to explain to him, "Those who tormented you, they are long gone now. They have left for other villages, and for other lands. You are free. You can leave anytime you want. No, I cannot leave. I was told I would die. I would rather live here than die instantly upon leaving this circle. So Travail bowed and went on his way. That is the way it is with most of us. We live in a prison of our own making. It is what we decide. The key, the knife, or the choice is always ours to make and is always within our reach. Some of you might say, well, it's easy to say if you're not actually in a prison or you're not actually being held or confined against your will. I can tell you that I have experienced this and I have seen this for myself. I have watched when belief was so strong that the shackles would fall from their arms. I have actually witnessed this, that if you believe something enough and it is time for you to be free, those shackles will fall from your arms. They'll fall from your feet. The doors of the prison will open. But it's up to you to decide, have you had enough of being imprisoned by your own choices? Are you ready to move on to another lesson? Are you ready to wake up? All right, it's time for poetry, and I'm going to go ahead and recite a couple of poems today, both elvish poems by myself and by Eruanna, again, our wonderful elven sister in the land of Estonia. My poem is called In Sight of Home. I've recited it before, and I thought I'd go ahead and do it on this show in case many of you have not heard this before. I love to write elvish poetry, and in this case, this one was inspired about the very common love and desire amongst elves to return home. And for most of us, we would call that Valinor. So this is a poem about one of us finding our way home, in sight of home. I peered into the blackest of nights, with sea foam dampening my face, while the stars reflected like a mirror into the calm seas below my sails. The days and nights became as one, with a mist of gray shrouding both ship and sail. A distant whale song would break the peace, but never did I hear the seagull call. How long had we been far out to sea? How long since I saw the shores of Beleriand? How long ago did we leave the war that set all the land afire? I set out with vain hope to find our home, to seek a light far greater than mine. But neither shore nor sound of Eldamar, nor star of hope would shine above. I will say that those who crewed my ship never wavered once from trust in me, though never did we see the shores and lost among the seas. Where does one find the strength of heart or courage to carry on when a world behind calls out for hope where none remains for those behind? Upon just such a night, a light shone far above, but no star was this that wavered high, for lost it was along its way, and upon feathered wings was set to breast. A great white bird was she that flew and fell upon our timbered deck. I held her in my arms with care, and we passed the night devoid of tears and dreams. By morning I found my elven love nestled deep within my arms, no longer in the form of a bird, and the light as stars upon her breast. The star was placed upon my brow, and as a beacon dispelled the mist, we turned the bow to westward sail to seek once more the gentle lands. Against all hope with morning sun, a pearl of white shore was seen afar, as jewels glittered in surf and sand, and beyond, the green hills of Eldamar. In keeping with the theme of going home, finding our elven home again in Valinor, I'd like to recite a couple of poems from our dear elven sister Eruanna, and that means a gift from God. Again, she's in Estonia and shares her wonderful poetry with us, so I'd love to read a couple of them to you. And here's her one, White Shores and Beyond. White shores and beyond, hearken, do you hear the wind? And do you see the ocean? The sea opens her hand and bids you come. The ships are like swans on the water, and the wind rises in rapture. The wind rises from twilight like the sun. The sea calls to the shore. The sea has called you home. And then one more. Sailing to Valinor. We are sailing across the seas where there are golden and silver trees. Soon we will see the undying lands where there is beauty and blessed light, because the Valinor is forever bright. As always, thank you very much, Eruanna. Again, she's a wonderful, dear elven sister of ours in the country of Estonia. I'm saving a lot of your poetry back so that we can read a little bit of it each episode. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. Future episodes are meant, again, to give the simple tales of hope and inspiration from the past. We'll be going to lots of different countries in the future, and I'll be relating tales of myself as well as poetry of others. So please, anybody that has written any elven fantasy poetry, any poetry that you would like to have read online, please feel free to submit it to us. I would love to recite your inspiration online. You can send it to radio@elvenscholar.org, radio@elvenscholar.org, and I would love to receive it and to read your poetry online. I'd like to go ahead and give credit now to the wonderful YouTube channels that donated the audio clips for the stories in the show. For the retelling of Don Quixote de la Mancha, it was told by Bedtime Stories Collections, a wonderful children's YouTube channel. Thanks for all the work that you guys do. The retelling of Oisin and the Land of Eternal Youth, thank you. This is for Ted Ed, a great educational YouTube channel also. And for all of the Zen stories that were told today, thank you to Dare to Do Motivation, an awesome Zen YouTube channel. You guys do a great job, and thank you so much for donating your audio clips for the show. Well, the show was originally announced to be at 2:30 as we were today, but the schedule is now more firmed up, and so you can find the show every Sunday at 3 o'clock on Heroes and Mortals Radio. It's time for me to go, so as always, thank you for listening, my friends, and until we are together again next week, may you be blessed by the elves. My name is Dr. Erendil Spindalelis, and I am the Elven Scholar.
Leave your Tinkerbells at the door and bin your fairy godmothers. I'm Kitty from Encounters with the Good People. Together, let's explore who or what fairy really are. Some say they are ghosts, cryptids, aliens, or spirits of the reincarnated. But do they dwell in our realm or in the other world? Join me as we visit the tales of our ancestors, as well as recent encounters with fairies, to find out. New episode every Sunday at 2:30 p.m, right here on Heroes and Mortals. Cheerio!